The following contains spoilers for Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, and El Camino. You have been warned. Greetings, fellow mortals. As we march our way to the end of Better Call Saul, I've been looking back at everything that's come before this final season. Breaking Bad, El Camino, Better Call Saul, they've all had tragic characters. The first of those characters that come to mind are all of the children that were hurt or killed throughout the series. If there's one bit of morality that has remained a constant in the Breaking Bad universe, it would be that harming children stands at a different level of evil than anything else. That's Jesse Pinkman's entire journey after all. He is the most innocent out of all of the Breaking Bad characters. His hold on the line between childhood and adulthood is one of the biggest journeys in the entirety of the series. Jesse has always shown to have one major belief that was shown time and time again in Breaking Bad. Never bring children into the game. He never had that much sympathy for adults that made their own choices. God knows that Jesse made terrible decision after terrible decision during the Breaking Bad run. One thing which always grounded him was the tendency to hold the innocent sacred, though. This is shown best in 4 different instances in the original show. The tragic consequences of drug abuse are shown in the episode Peekaboo, when Jesse finds a child being at least neglected, if not outright abused by his parents. Then there was when the drug dealers killed the 11-year-old Tomas after turning the child into a hitman for them. That set up the downfall which was to come in season 4. Finally, there's the obvious example of Brock and the boy that Todd killed after witnessing the train heist. All of these interactions show Jesse being the moral center of Breaking Bad. Despite everything that he did, Jesse still showed compassion and love for the innocent. Even as he lost his own innocence, Jesse still looked out for those that couldn't defend themselves. Of course, the children that suffered in Breaking Bad were more of plot points than actual characters. We know nothing about them or their personalities after all. There's nothing wrong with this writing tactic. I often find myself questioning the morality of even using child actors anyway. I can understand why the creators want to keep the children's roles minimal whenever possible. Perhaps that's why they didn't focus on kids as much in Better Call Saul. Instead, the show focused on the other end of the spectrum when it came to innocence. Let me ask you a question. Who is the most vulnerable after the young children? The answer is the elderly. While perhaps not as innocent as children, it's easy to see how people in their twilight years can be just as vulnerable. Their bodies and minds are slowly decaying as they age more and more. This isn't a condemnation of them. This will happen to all of us if we live long enough. That's why the abuse of the elderly is shown as being one of the most morally corrupt aspects of Better Call Saul. And this is a show that focuses on drug trades and murder. Just like with the children, the older characters in the show act more like plot points. They have more defined personalities than the kids, but it's not the same as the major or minor characters of Better Call Saul. Plus, they do manage to get a team of lawyers to fight for them. Speaking of those lawyers, let's get to the topic of the video. I spent a lot of time building up to it, but I do think that Howard is the most tragic character in not only Better Call Saul, but the entirety of the Breaking Bad universe. Now, I suppose that you could argue that there are many other characters that are even more tragic than Howard, but as I explained earlier, I'm focusing on actually defined personalities here. The aspect of Howard that makes me think that he's the most tragic is the fact that he was shown to be a good man. I can only think of 2 times where he did anything that I found to be somewhat morally gray. That would be when he acted as Chuck's fall guy for keeping Jimmy out of HHM, and when he punished Kim for Jimmy's commercial. But I think that the first negative actually acts more as a positive in my mind. Chuck was a business owner and a partner to Howard after all. He had a large say over HHM, not to mention that this involved Chuck's brother. Would you honestly do anything different than Howard when it came to that instance? He made a tough decision for his business, the people that worked for him, and his clients. Would you honestly destroy your father's life's work and your life's work just to give a job to your business partner's brother, especially when said business partner actually hates his own brother? I don't think so, and I think that you'd be lying if you said that you would. Not to mention that Howard never ran from that badge of shame. He fully embraced being hated by Jimmy and Kim for what he did. He accepted being the bad guy because it was best for the many people that relied on him. You could even say the same thing about Kim's punishment and demotion. Remember that Chuck was still involved with HHM at that point. Plus, their partnered firm was still watching their actions. Not to mention that all the employees were watching too. It's a sad reality of business that made it so that I never wanted to get involved in management. Sometimes you have to make an example of people for something that someone else did. It sucks and is terrible, but that's just the world we live in. And I can't think of any change politically, socially, or economically that would change the fact that we're tied to our family's decisions. Thus, I don't find it morally disgusting. It's just cold, hard, unfair business. Howard accepted being the bad guy because someone had to. When it was all over, he even congratulated Kim for leaving and finding success on her own. He didn't have any hard feelings about losing a gigantic client to her. It was all part of business to him. Taking it personally would have been a terrible idea. Unfortunately for him, everyone around him took business very personally. One of the most tragic things about Howard is the fact that he got sucked down the whirlpool that was the McGill brothers. What was he supposed to do when it came to a feud between his business partner and a man that used to work for him? He had no choice but to side with Chuck. Going against Chuck meant ruin for everyone at Hamlin, and McGill. Howard had no choice but to ride the wave. Then it became clear that sticking by Chuck meant a downward spiral that they would never get out of. That's when Howard paid out of his own pocket to buy Chuck out of the business. After Chuck committed suicide, Howard blamed himself even though he didn't have a choice in the matter when it came to the firm. Was he supposed to let Chuck and Jimmy's feud ruin everything? Imagine it. A destroyed firm, people out of work, clients left flailing in the wind. It honestly felt as though Howard was just trying to help people. After all, this all came at a gigantic financial. But Howard was introspective. He looked in at his own soul. He accepted the consequences of his decisions and found peace. He worked to better himself and to actually help the people around him. Did he come off as a little pretentious and out of touch at times? Of course. But it wasn't like he hated the people around him. He treated everyone with respect and went out of his way to try to remember people's names. To me, he was just trying to be kind. He even went to therapy and was trying to take steps to fix his failing marriage. I'm going to be honest, the scene where Howard's wife dismissed his making coffee for her just broke my heart a little bit. Now, I may not know the whole story of his marriage, but it looked to me like they were just workaholics that fell out of love. But Saul and Kim had to go in and completely shatter it. Saul took all of the anger and guilt that he felt for his brother and he turned it on Howard. He hated Howard because he wanted to be Howard. Kim took her hatred for success and wealth and blamed it on Howard. She seemed to use him as an outlet for the fact that she wasn't happy with her life. Howard became a lightning rod for their suffering, and he faced it like a man. Instead of cowering, he faced Jimmy in a fair boxing match. Howard tried to face the conflict honorably and legally. Imagine if Howard wasn't such a good person. Imagine if he was willing to hit Jimmy and Kim where it hurt the most. I don't think that those two would have won that war if Howard hadn't been such a good man. And that's the most tragic aspect of all of this. Howard was good. He may have been born into a privileged position with a silver spoon in his mouth, but he recognized that fact and constantly strived to earn his own way in the world. In a lot of ways, Howard is to Better Call Saul what Hank was to Breaking Bad. They were two flawed but good men trying to be better and to do the right thing, except that Hank was a police officer. Hank did, in fact, sign up for the danger. Howard did not. Howard did not make any bad choices. Howard did not choose to fight like Hank did either. He was an innocent man that had everything pulled away from him. Perhaps there's another reason why I see a major difference between Hank and Howard. At least Hank got to be remembered as a hero and have his legacy. Kim and Saul destroyed Howard's life entirely. No one will remember him as a good man, a good boss, or a good lawyer. They'll forever think that he was a drug addict that committed suicide. They'll never know that his life was ruined by two nut jobs that got a high off of hurting him. They'll never know that he was murdered in cold blood by Lalo. They'll never know that he was buried below a meth lab with his own murderer. Instead, the people had to look at the pictures of Howard at his funeral and see a lie that Jimmy and Kim created. They took everything from a good man just because they found it to be fun. And then they ruined the memory of Howard in the mind of his wife. Imagine that. Someone ruins your entire legacy with a lie to the point that your spouse is broken because of it. If there's one positive that can come out of this, at least we all know that this is fiction. We all know that Howard was a good man. We can stew on that, and we know that he deserved far more than what Chuck, Jimmy, Kim, or especially Lalo were willing to give him. Thank you so much for watching. If you like my takes on storytelling, please consider subscribing and liking the video. It would really help me out. Also, remember that I will be self-publishing my novel, Dance of Frozen Death, at the start of 2023. I hope that you will check it out. I appreciate you. Do not despair.